Nebraska funeral worker fired after using sex doll of dead man.
No,
That
the
sounds like a
bigger
fun one. Why don't we
headline.
do that?
Oh my God, what a
mean,
headline!
Just end
What
on a
a
lighter
headline.
note today.
Wow, I'm gonna look that one up later.
That
We
would
should
be
bookmark
ending on
that
a
for
lighter
Wednesday.
note.
We should do
Boy.
that.
But this is also ending on sort of a lighter than what we've been talking about, because this headline here says squad reps blasted for calling for a ceasefire following Hamas attack on Israel. Now, this is kind of a week old story, but I'm showing you the headline to help me preface this story, and that is progressive except for Palestine pretend to be pro Palestine right now. And because what I noticed, I started seeing some tweets. I'm like, wait a minute, you guys just a few days ago were all tweeting and calling out people racists and bigots for being pro-Palestine. That's what all the Jamaal Bowmans, the AOCs, the Ilhan Omars, they were all calling out people for this. But now I'm seeing an influx of a lot of tweets, and I'll bring it up in a second. A lot of tweets that now are on the opposite side, where they're kind of saying, yeah, we got to do this for the Palestinians. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? So I wanted to do this segment and see if any of you noticed any of these tweets also. And we'll start here. Let me go all the way to the bottom and start with, of course, to start with AOC here. And I'll read it. I'll just kind of go through them. Humans can only survive without water for about 3 days. Gaza has run dry. The blockade on water, food, and electricity is an indiscriminate collective punishment and crime. It is cruel and unjust to have millions of people in Gaza, nearly half children. It must end now. Now, when she voted for funding, when she voted for funding for Israel, did she give a caveat? None of this money can go to do anything to kids.
No.
Did she do that? You get what I'm saying? So let me read a couple more before I go to you guys for a reaction here, just so you can kind of encompass all of your reactions to everybody. Here goes the new golden boy, the newest AOC, Max Frost. And now, if you don't know the story about Max Frost, just briefly, before he was elected, he was on the ground with Palestinian groups, on the ground with them, entrenched in their struggle. And then when he started to see he was gonna get elected, he literally dropped them like a hot potato, not returning calls. Nick did a stream or a segment on this. Go check it out. But let me read what he says here. When the ambassador begins to justify the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza by saying that they voted for Hamas, the video shows videos of children walking. There hasn't been an election in Gaza since 2006, and half of Gaza are children who cannot vote, plus weren't alive in 2006. Now, if you didn't know, Maxwell Frost is a staunch supporter of Israel.
Of course
he has made several comments about it. Now let me go to Jamaal Bowman, and then I'll go to your comments. Here goes Jamaal Bowman. Now, if you didn't know, Jamaal Bowman called out many people when this first kind of dropped. He called out many people for being pro-Palestinian. And now let's read what he says now, though. He says, outside the White House, right now, there are hundreds of young Jews calling for the end of violence on innocent lives in Gaza. There's nothing I could say that captures my respect, admiration, and heartache. Is that right? Heartache for members of this community who have endured unspeakable atrocities and still speak out like this. To me, this shows that a brighter future is in fact possible. So this is a sort of, I'm saying something about Palestinians, but really patting the back of Jews, saying, even though you're going through atrocities you're still out there supporting Palestinians. So, first question, I'll give you two questions for everybody. Have you been noticing the shift in tone? And there's more I'm going to show you. Have you been noticing a shift in tone with progressives from the first sort of day to now? Now that, and I think it's a lot of pressure put on by protest. Like they no longer can just pretend like people aren't pro-Palestinian to kind of give sort of lip service to that. But have you noticed it? And what do you think about this? Them playing this two, sort of running in two lanes: the pro-Palestinian lane and the pro-Israel lane. I'll start with Russell, and then we'll go to Chuck. So Russell and Chuck. Had you noticed this shift, and what do you think about this shift in the two lanes, speaking out of both sides of their mouth?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit. What was the question?
Oh, my bad. Just like had you noticed a shift in these progressives, except for Palestine? Go ahead.
Yeah, that actually has been fascinating me. We're gonna do a pretty long segment on that on Wednesday, especially because I'm very plugged in still to like the theater art world, and those people are the biggest shit libs you will ever find, ever. People in that industry, and they're not all lining up behind Israel like that. I'm seeing actors, particularly actors, because they always have to worry about whether they're going to get blacklisted. Actors have really no power in the industry over whether they're going to work or not. I've been very surprised to see a fair number of them coming out for Palestine. I saw one who's really like an independent artist who has been posting about how she's joining phone banks. I was thinking about having her on the show, actually. Okay, to give you an idea where she's coming from politically, she organized phone banks for John Ossoff this week.
Oh Lord, Jesus!
I'm not even fucking kidding. But she's organizing phone banks to Congress in support of Gaza right now. And she posted something about how she lost a lot of the followers. She has like patrons. She lost a lot of patrons because she's been promoting people to phone bank and call Congress on behalf of Gaza. I've never seen the libs that I know have any opinion that you wouldn't get off MSNBC. Not ever. This is the first time. So it's really fascinating to see it. And I think it's a result of, and you could see this in the Harvard story. I think the Harvard story really emblemized this. Okay, our elite classes, in my opinion, for their own reasons, have been promoting the idea of really reckoning with our colonial past, decolonize the curriculum, decolonize the canon, decolonize your mind, right? And now a war broke out between a colonizing power and brown people, and they're very surprised to find some people took it seriously. That you can't tell people for at least the last 10 years, particularly at elite universities, that the Western colonizing powers are evil and they oppress brown people who are mostly defenseless to fight them off, and then have a situation like this erupt and expect them all to be, I stand with Israel. It's really interesting, the contradictions that are arising from this.
Yeah, it is, but I think it's an illustration of movement politics leading electoral politics. Politicians are going to pander, and when it comes to Palestine, maybe all but two have had consistency. Cory Bush and Rashida Tlaib has had a measure of consistency, and I think just about everybody else has not. And what I do is I take that as a win for the activists. I take that a win for the incredible protests that are happening all day Saturday, all, not just in America, all over the world. My heart on Sunday, my heart swelled when I saw thousands in the street come out at a pro-Palestinian protest to call out. You don't think they see that too? You don't think they see people all around the world? And then on top, Bowman's comments come after Jews came out today. Oh, so I look at it. This is, we have the power. We're the ones with the power. We need to get back in the street, not just when there's a Republican president, but when there's a Democratic president, and fight for those same issues. And when we do that, then we could mold electoral opinion. And I think that mobilizing factor, the right wing does that really well. Whether Trump is in office or not, he's mobilizing people in the direction of white supremacy. You see a lot of local politicians sounding exactly like Trump did to get votes. So he doesn't need to be in office. But what we need to do is be in the street like we've been, and then we'll see some of that change. But it starts with us, not waiting for politicians.
Well, yeah, look, there's been I'm
No, go ahead. Go
CJ,
ahead.
Were you talking? Sorry, you cut out.
No,
for
go
a
ahead.
second. Okay. Yeah, look, I mean, AOC, Jamaal Bowman, these people have demonstrated over and over again, they will demonstrate as much courage as they feel they can get away with, right? And only that much, right? And so, AOC condemned the rally that Russell filmed last week in New York City. There was a Free Palestine rally in New York City, and AOC, what was her quote? It's callous and bigoted. Right. And so this is an example of pressure being mounted to the point where the staunchly pro-Israel position is just not tenable. Right. It's just not viable. I mean, I see up on the screen here, President Biden warns Israel not to occupy Gaza. The fact that Biden is talking like that is proof that they're just not going to be able to sell the staunchly pro-Israel position without caveats. Now, that doesn't mean Joe Biden's going to lift a finger to stop them from murdering 1 million people. He's obviously not. He's going to Israel Wednesday. But the fact that they feel a need to broadcast out a certain degree of concern for the people of Gaza and the West Bank shows that public sentiment has turned. Right. And so I think it is, a telling sign in that way, because when this first happened, I just said, well, that's it. I mean, Gaza's no more. They're just going to level it. And that I think smart money is still on that to happen, unfortunately, obviously. But we're seeing a lot more resistance to the narrative than even I thought we would. I mean, it doesn't feel right to say that that's a good sign or a silver lining, because ultimately, like I said, I do think this is going to end horribly. But if you want to mark it down that, some people tried their best to fight back, and that was reflected in the coverage of the event, I mean, I suppose that's something. And to the extent that it is something, this is why I don't speak for everybody on the panel, but I know for myself, and I think I can speak for Russell as two Jewish guys, this is why we feel a certain responsibility to be as loud on this issue as we have been, because no one is going to push back except for the activists and the independents, right? MSNBC, I don't know if they ended up suspending Ali Velshi because he was on the air yesterday, but they had a meeting and Ali Velshi's producers weren't happy. They said, hey, why isn't there any pro-Palestinian representation at this meeting? And they got a nasty email back from NBC, and then HR had to call a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting to hash it out, right? The fact that these conversations are happening is reflective of a certain change in public sentiment. And like I said, I don't want to put on any sort of rose-tinted eyeglasses about this, because I don't think it's going to be enough to do what has to be done to save Gaza before the clock runs out. And that's a horrible tragedy. And I think that's a failure of humanity and a failure of the world. But it is what it is, for what it's worth.
Let me read 3 more tweets and we're gonna close out here. Here's I'm gonna read one more from each, from Jamal, from AOC, and from
Can I
Max.
just say quickly, who the
Yeah,
fuck
go ahead. I'm
cares
sorry.
what
Go ahead.
Jamaal Bowman says about? Dude was asked about Ukraine and had no idea what was going on in Donbass. Had not a clue. He was asked directly. And he's like, yeah. And they're like, wait, you don't know, but yet you're voting for funding. And he's like, what? And just ran off into the building. This is why voting doesn't matter. These people, most of the people who are elected into office have no clue what's actually going on. They just do what they're told. And we've seen that time and time again. And these progressives, whatever the fuck that means, they're frauds. They're absolute 100% frauds. And yeah, I mean, as Keaton said, I think, okay, cool. I think it's great that the message has shifted and that more people are waking up to the bullshit. I think that's fantastic, but it is too little too late. And these politicians, it is when it's politically advantageous for them to do this kind of stuff. For example, AOC ran on Free Palestine, right? In 2017, 2018, she ran on. The second she got elected, like within 3 days, it was off her website. Yep. These people are political pawns to them. Palestinians are political pawns to these people. They're disgusting human beings. It's no different than her going to the border and crying at the fence, like, oh, these poor kids under Trump. Biden gets elected. All of a sudden, she's fucking dead silent on that shit. Has she been to the border under Biden? No, I don't think so. She's a fucking fraud. They all are. And so I don't give a shit what they say, but I do think it is important that we are seeing the tide turning in terms of the narrative, that more people are waking up to the bullshit. I do think it's too little too late. And I think it is unfortunately going to end very badly. And that crushes me on levels I can't even really comprehend. But I mean, it is, I think, significant. And I deal with the same shit with the Assange stuff. Like, the tide is turning. He's probably going to die.
Right, exactly. And yeah, that's a good point, Misty. And just so I make sure everybody knows where I'm coming from, I don't think their rhetoric is anything to give them credit for. I think it is an indicator of public sentiment.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a great point. Let me read. This is Jamaal Bowman breaking. President Biden warns Israel not to occupy Gaza. While Biden stands with Israel against Hamas, he still says on 60 Minutes that a new occupation of Gaza would be a big mistake. Millions of voices standing up for humanity are being heard. Keep going. It's like rhetoric is enough. He's basically trying to say here. And here's Max.
It's an election year too. We're in an election cycle.
Facts. And let me read this one from Max Frost. He tweets an article from Politico, and that title of the article is "Progressive Lawmakers Write Biden to," this is the strongly worded letter, "write Biden to express deep concern over Israel's coming Gaza campaign." Did you feel it when I read it? And let me read what he says here. Here goes Max. "I joined with many of my colleagues in a letter to the administration to push for adherence to the international law plus food and water to Gaza. We believe that pushing back Hamas and rescuing hostages is important. We also believe that bombing innocent Palestinians in Gaza is not security." Now, this is essentially what progressives, except for Palestinians, do. Now, what these elected ones do, they vote for it, and then they go, what are you doing, crazy guy? What are you doing, crazy guy, that I gave a gun and a bunch of bullets? What are you doing to those people? You get what I'm saying? It's like, it's a little too late. You've already given this madman all of this money. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
They only speak on it when something pops off like this. Where were you for I mean, obviously this dude's new to the scene, but the only time they ever speak is when something pops off. Where were you? This has been going on for fucking decades. Yeah. If you only speak up when Hamas actually fights back, then there's a problem with you, because Israel's been killing kids all fucking year. That's been taking place. And he's been in office all year, right? Has he mentioned a word of it all fucking year? No. Suddenly now he cares. And I don't take you seriously at all. It's obvious that this is being used for political points, and that's fucking gross.
Yeah, so if you're chasing the news cycle on this, I mean, the war machine is always 3 steps ahead of the news cycle. So if you're chasing the news cycle, then you're way too late. It doesn't mean anything, really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the only thing is that I would agree with every single comment. Yeah, they're fraudulent. Yeah, they're going where the political wind blows. And at the same time, I want more people saying that, not because of them, but because other people are listening to them. That they may not listen to this show because we want to at some point hit a critical mass that could actually impact what's happening in Palestine, as far away or as that might be. So a lot of times I'll be like, yeah, that was fraudulent, but I still welcome the growing sentiment, even if it's fake. And if I'm wrong on that, where is my flaw if I'm wrong on that?
No, I don't think
wouldn't
you're
say
wrong on that. I mean, I
wrong.
think Marjorie Taylor Greene posing with
Yep.
Code Pink is a win too.
Yeah.
You
Yep.
know what I mean?
100%,
It's a win.
thank you.
Whatever.
What do you say
Yeah.
about that, Chuck? What do you say about that? Do you feel the same? Would you give the same analysis to Marjorie Taylor Greene doing that? Like at least she's saying it. Do you have the
or
same? Do you
Justin
have the same
Amash,
logic?
or yeah.
I don't on that one, because I do believe I have a strong opinion on sort of anti-war. I want you to be anti-war, and I don't think that's
So
the case with her.
So
AOC
you
is
do
not
believe-
anti-war. You're willing to go with her on
So-
this, but she's not
Right, that's what I
anti-war.
mean. Like, if you're going to take the win from a phony politician,
He was
then
fine
take
with
the
the
win
people
from
in
every
Venezuela.
phony
Well, I'm
politician.
not
Who the hell
trying to
cares?
take a win. I want to take the growing sentiment, the people who follow her. Like forget
Well,
them.
yeah.
But that's what I mean,
Same
Chuck.
thing.
So like when Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted out the photo with Code Pink, one of the
That's
reasons
amazing.
I thought that was good is because a lot of Marjorie Taylor Greene supporters are
I
not
know.
people who have probably ever heard of Code Pink ever.
Yep.
And so it gets the word out. So I mean, it's if you're going to take the win from a phony politician, you got to
No.
take the win from all phony politicians.
This
as
is
far as I
the
can
point
see.
that I was. This is the point that I was going to get with.
I'll pause and
Chuck.
reflect on that one. Go ahead.
With Chuck is that I know it's because
Pause
it's
and
hard.
reflect on
'cause
the
it's
text.
No,
Marjorie
that's good. No, this is good. This is why we have
Marjorie
exchange.
Taylor
Because I take
Yeah.
like, when AOC and Ilhan Omar write a letter to Joe Biden about Julian Assange, I retweet that shit, and I'm like, hey, cool, thanks, and I call
Right.
her office, and I do all of those things. But I'm also going to do it with Marjorie Taylor Greene when she's against funding Ukraine, absolutely. And it's not because I think Marjorie Taylor Greene's a piece of shit, but if I can exploit her support for something that I really care about, then I'm going to do that. Absolutely, I want to get shit done.
That's how it works. That's politics.
That's how it works.
Free Assange.
Chuck,
For free
do you-
Assange,
do you-
for ending war, for any fucking thing. I'll work with just about anybody to avoid nuclear annihilation. Maybe that makes me crazy, but I am willing to do that.
Well, and this is what's so tragic about this situation, because unlike Ukraine, there is nobody in authority with an anti-Israel funding position. It doesn't matter if you go for Trump. It doesn't matter if you go for Biden. It doesn't matter who you go
They're
for.
all owned.
They're
by
all
Israel.
pro-Israel.
Let me read this last one from AOC. Any person can see that ordering 1+ million people to move in 24 hours is not possible. It's unacceptable. The UN has already deemed the order impossible with devastating humanitarian consequences. Humanity is at stake. Nearly half our children. We must hold this. This is again, you can't be at the top of a steep hill, push somebody in a cart off the hill, and then when they start rolling, you go, wait a minute, this is going to be, you already started it with your votes. You already started this ball sort of rolling down the hill. But another thing I wanted to mention here is that why are you mentioning the UN? Because they say more things about the UN, about Israel than just this. So if you're going to go with the UN on here is what I'm getting to. Go with the UN on what them saying, calling Israel an apartheid state.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying? Like, you don't
do.
just go with the UN on just this. If anybody else wanted to chime in before I bring the tweet down, this tweet in particular, did anybody see this tweet?
No.
And what do you think about
I don't
when
think I
she
did.
says here, humanity is at stake? That is
been.
so ironic. Humanity was at stake
Fuck
when they've
you.
been.
It has
Jesus
been.
Christ.
You've been voting for kids to be slaughtered this whole time. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to fucking hear it. It's just so gross. Ugh.
Well, that's it. I mean, they go for the easy
Yes.
virtue signaling. But far be it from me to be the ray of sunshine on this show. But even the fact that you have politicians in Congress saying this is a tremendous sea change. And going back to the example of my John Ossoff supporting acquaintance there, this is like the establishment built the exhaust port into the Death Star without realizing it. I believe my skepticism around a lot of what broadly gets defined as woke is very often not the core principle, but the application and the purpose of the application. If it were a threat to power, they wouldn't slap it on the side of a Starbucks cup.
Right.
It's all intended to divide,
Yeah.
to get people to undermine class consciousness and divert all of that energy into channels that don't actually threaten power. But they fucked up. They fucked up. They thought they could talk about historic colonial exploitation and keep it at litigating that. And they didn't seem to think through what would happen if you had a real life 21st century example of the shit that they've spent 10 years getting them enraged about through historical examples. And the result is the Ossoff person making calls for Gaza. They've lost control of this narrative. And it'll be interesting to see what these real elite class kids do about this, because now they lost their job offers to McKinsey and Goldman Sachs for signing on to these letters. So what do? Do they shut up? Do they rebel? Do they occupy the dean's office like back in the day? It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
I just gotta say, this is the first I'm hearing of this Ossoff canvasser that he's talking about inviting on our show. I didn't know about this. By me.
Well, I didn't invite her.
No, I know. I'm kidding. I'm busting your balls.
I mean, I thought it would actually be interesting because of what we're talking about to invite someone like that on. Like, hey, man, honestly, I don't agree with your politics, but I'm kind of amazed that you're doing this. So where are you coming from?
Just got to ask the chat.
All right,
chill,
everybody.
for it.
I think we've come to the end